1 week, friends, until this election. 1 week. And I do want everyone to stay so motivated right now. You're going to have to stand in lines. You're going to have to convince those friends of yours, those relatives who are, either worried about COVID being outside, waiting in lines, or they're worried about, making the wrong decision or whatever, or they're apathetic and they just don't care. You got to get as many people as you can out there. And I think one good way to motivate folks would be to have Hillary Clinton explain to them how horrifying it would be to her if Donald Trump won 4 more years. So terrible. Play 21.
I can't entertain the idea of him winning. So let's just preface it by that, because it makes me literally sick to my stomach to think that we'd have 4 more years of this abuse and destruction of our institutions and damaging of our norms and our values and lessening of our leadership, and the list goes on.
Lessening our values. Isn't it amazing that Hillary Clinton really thinks that she's in a position to talk to people about values and decency? I mean, this is a woman who has been a professional liar for the last, 30 years or so. This is what she does. But she's the moral compass of America, and she's worried. It makes her sick to her stomach. What was the really terrible thing that Donald Trump did in this? I know he's responsible for 200,000 COVID deaths. Idiots think that. That's true. Is he responsible for the COVID deaths in Argentina, which right now has the highest per capita death rate from COVID of any place in the entire world? Is that Trump's fault, or I just want to know? Europe is now going through lockdowns, and people are protesting the lockdowns in countries like Spain. They're saying, hold on, we already did this. And they still have been, the media wants you to think that these other countries, it turned into a wild party and everybody was going out drinking and doing all this stuff. It was all normal. No, that's not true. Just like it was in a lot of places in this country. Limitations on gatherings, people still being cautious, people still masking, big spikes in cases. Well, that's not very, for those who believe you just have to listen to Fauci, it's not very encouraging, is it? Doing everything that they tell us to do, and we're still having big spikes in cases. Maybe what they're telling us to do is insufficient. Maybe it doesn't even matter. And remember when it was 15 days to slow the spread? Why wasn't it 15 days to shut the virus down entirely? Or why didn't they just tell us 3 months, we're going to shut this down entirely? We're going to kill, because they know it's impossible. So if it's impossible to stamp out the virus entirely, what are you doing by putting imperfect mitigation measures in place, as we are, right? You're just extending the timeline of transmission. And it's not even until vaccine, because Dr. Fauci, this is the latest, is telling people now, well, even if you have a vaccine, that only will, that is likely to prevent you from getting symptoms, but it doesn't mean you won't have the virus. Well, is he now claiming that even with the vaccine, you can still transmit the virus? Is that the claim? Folks, we're going to be locked down. The bureaucrats are going to keep doing this to us until we say enough. Shut your face. You don't know what you're talking about. Leave us alone. I have rights. I'm done with this. Until we reach that point as a country, they're going to keep doing this. They're going to go, wow, there's no downside for them. What, do you think Fauci is so sad that, the bars are all going out of business and he can order takeout? He's fine. He's rich. No problem. So it's really stunning. I know I'm getting off on a little tangent here about this, but the whole pitch for Donald Trump losing this election is COVID. That's really it. Oh, and he's a racist and a rapist and a sexist and all these things, right? All the Russian asset, all the stupid stuff that they say. But the only policy area where they think they can really dig in is on COVID. The president understands that. He knows that this is the game that they're playing right now. And he's just saying, look, it's going to change on November 4th. All of a sudden, there's going to be a very different feeling on this one. But until we get to that point, we don't know how the American people are going to finally come down on this. Over 60 million early votes cast so far. So yes, if you can vote for Trump, at least you'll be upsetting Hillary Clinton, which in and of itself is a thing that I would assume everybody's very pleased about. I know that I am. And I'm glad that the president is also pointing out that Joe Biden's running a very risky strategy here. He is running out the clock without knowing what's really on the scoreboard. Would you do that in a sports game? the coach saying, I feel like we're ahead. I don't know what the score is, but I think we did better. I think we scored more baskets than they did. So let's just pass it around and see if we can run time off the clock here to finish this thing out. Now, that's one thing when you know you're up. They don't know they're up. They think they're up. So instead of trying to score, they're just trying to prevent the other side from scoring. And that's with this keeping Biden home situation. Play 17.
You know, it's funny. I thought it wasn't going to make it. But one thing, unlike Joe, where he goes into a basement, if he loses, and, you know, who knows what happens, right? It's called an election. He should be ashamed of himself because he didn't work. And no, seriously, he didn't work. One thing, I did 5, 6, and sometimes 7 of these in one day those last few days. And during the regular time, I do 2 or 3. Today I'm doing 3 of these. Tremendous crowd waiting for us at another point.
Yeah, Biden's work ethic on display for everybody here. Calling lids, calling it quits. Of course, he's now saying, "Oh, we work super late all the time." This is Joe Biden trying to explain that one. Play 14.
You kept a relatively light public schedule in the past few days. Can you give us a sense of how much you'll be traveling in the next few days, where you might be going?
I just told you where I was going to be traveling, and by the way, I traveled the last few days, too.
Are you going to Iowa, sir?
I'm going to be going to Iowa, I'm going to Wisconsin, I'm going to Georgia, I'm going to Florida, and maybe other places as well. There's a lot we've been doing as well in terms of being online and everything from fundraising efforts to making sure we meet. I met today with a group of leaders in the Democratic Party, laying out where we're going to go, getting their input and the like. So we're constantly, there's not been a day that hadn't been a 12-hour day yet.
That's right. Joe works super hard. They call lit at 9 a.m. a lot of days, but he's working hard. What's the point of going to a state if you're not going to deal with any people or talk to any of the actual residents? Maybe they'll speak to a handful or something just for the appearance's sake. But usually you campaign so that you get out there and you see the folks, right? That's not what's happening at these Biden rallies. So he's going to these places just to go a little bit. I think someone pointed out, it was Dagan McDowell from Fox, that Biden was saying he had an event in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it just happened to technically be across the border from Delaware. It's 20 minutes from his house. That's Biden really putting in the extra mile. Look, maybe they don't need to. Maybe they are protecting a lead that they actually have. I'm not convinced. I think Donald Trump's still going to win this thing. But as I've been telling you, I think it's going to be very close. I believe you might have an election here that comes down to one state. I've been looking at the numbers. I've been playing with the delegate counts, and you may have a situation where Trump gets to 272 and Biden gets to 262. That's actually a viable scenario that I war-gamed out earlier this week when I was looking at how this would all add up. And you know what the deciding factor would be in that situation? Pennsylvania. It all comes down to Pennsylvania. Quite a strategy the Biden team has here. Don't do very much. Just sort of be there. Let the media carry the water for you. Let the media do the heavy lifting. Biden's like the manager on the site while the construction workers are actually building the house, right? He's like, yeah, good job, guys. Yeah, keep going. CNN and MSNBC, they're the ones out there in the trenches really making it happen. Is there an enthusiasm gap? These are now the intangibles. I mean, you have to look at some of these intangibles for why Trump could still win, given that as I look at all the polling, he's behind pretty much everywhere that matters right now. According to the polls, that's not the same thing as saying he's actually behind everywhere, right? Most of the national news media, the punditocracy, is already confident of a Biden win. And he is in this run out the clock mode, but I still think Trump's going to win. It's not going to be a landslide, though. Like I said, I think Trump is just going to barely squeak past 270. I think he'll get to between 270 and 280, let's say, electoral college votes. And it could be a one-state race. But even if that's the case, it's going to be a massive shock to the consensus-driven world of political prognostication, as you know. And I do think it's going to be the absolute dogfight in Pennsylvania that determines this. Could even delay the final election, because think about this, you have all these states finally that are called and counted, but Pennsylvania is too close to call, and that's the state that will determine who wins the election. And they've got a few extra days after the election to count ballots. Can you imagine what we are setting ourselves up for here? I think there's a very real chance this is the way it's going to go. I know we have a lot of listeners in Pennsylvania, so you'll definitely have to share your thoughts with me about which districts you think, or which areas of the state are going to be key in this whole process. But I think the biggest reason for optimism is the intangible stuff right now. For one thing, Trump is going all out in the last days of his campaign. He's doing multiple events a day. He's taking his pitch for 4 more years to this string of 10,000 person plus, venues. These crowds are huge. And look, I get it. I understand that anecdotal information is dangerous in a political season. And I've had word from the campaign's ground game in Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania that they think that there is a fire in the belly of Trump's base that's just going to defy all expectations come Election Day. But the thing about a silent majority is you don't know it's there till it speaks. And we're going to have to see if they speak on Election Day for this president. I know the MAGA faithful believe so. And this has been a very challenging year for the country. It's very tough to feel like you know what the zeitgeist is. What is the pulse of the nation right now politically? And I do think Trump has turned the corner. There's a momentum to his campaign right now, and Biden is largely hiding in the basement. So is he right? Is Trump right when he says that Biden is hiding because people don't have enthusiasm? Play 18.
And we had 2 events. Sleepy Joe was down there, and they said, you got to get out of this basement. So he traveled from Delaware to a little tiny corner of Pennsylvania, like right next to Delaware, and he made a speech. And he said that he doesn't do these kind of rallies because of COVID, No, he doesn't do that because nobody shows up. That's why.
Because nobody shows up. It is tough to, I know a lot of you are saying, see, Buck, and I've seen the photos too, but what a convenient excuse, right? Biden's had a convenient excuse not to be out beyond his handler's reach on this campaign trail, right? Where they keep him on a very tight leash, and he's been able to get away with this because of COVID, right? The hiding in the basement routine and the very sparsely populated events that he does have. It's because of COVID. So there's a lot of unknown here, friends. But absent some truly outrageous last-minute ambush, I think Trump is going to find is going to spend his final days in this campaign focused on radical Democrat positions like fossil fuels, extreme lockdowns, higher taxes. That's all stuff that may do well in Santa Monica for Joe Biden and his donors and on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. But energy industry folks in Pennsylvania probably want to keep their jobs. And Pennsylvania isn't it the Keystone State? It's the keystone to this election, that's for sure. And I still have this feeling, this deep sense that Trump is going to once again blow away the doubters and the haters, and he's going to make political history. He pulled off what you remember felt like a political miracle back in 2016. I think he's going to need something similar this time around to get it done, but I still believe the Trumpster is going to pull it off. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better hope this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially, and it goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys, they are cyber thieves, and your home's title, guess what? It's up there in the cloud, stored on servers. It's in the cyber realm. They use your information. They get a quit claim deed, kick you off your home's title, put themselves on, take out loans against your home. You often won't find out about this until you get the payment notices or perhaps even a foreclosure notice in the mail. You got to take action today with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. It'll create a virtual barrier around your home's title. HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Take action today.
I'm not shutting down oil fields. I'm not eliminating fracking. I'm investing in clean energy, and we're going to make sure that we don't continue to subsidize the oil companies. There's 2 estimates. They get somewhere between $25 billion and $40 billion in subsidies. That money should go in to making sure we do a lot of other good things.
Yeah, a lot of windmills and turbines and solar panels, because those, don't you love looking at a giant field of solar panels? Isn't that just so aesthetically pleasing? I mean, do you realize what goes into making a solar panel? A lot of them are so energy intensive that they put more, the creation of the CO2 panel puts more CO2 into the air than is saved by using the solar panel over its life cycle. At least that used to be the case. Maybe they've gotten a little bit more efficient now. But Biden is clearly worried about Pennsylvania and about his comments on fracking. He challenged Trump to show what the comments were, right? He challenged Trump to show whether or not he really had said that he would ban fracking. And sure enough, turns out he wants to ban it. He just wants to take some time to do it. He just wants to wait a little while. Well, how long is that? And the incrementalism that is obvious from a statement like that, right? The position that Biden and others are taking here is, well, sure, we can't outright get rid of it tomorrow, but we're going to make it as onerous from a regulatory perspective and expensive from a taxation perspective as possible. And we're going to invest in clean energy of the future. Remember when the government did that with the Solyndra debacle under the Obama administration? The Obama administration, Department of Energy, thought it'd be a good idea to have taxpayer cash tossed in, hundreds of millions of dollars of it tossed into a solar company that was losing, and this is true, was losing money on every solar panel it sold. So it's like it would cost $5 to make a solar panel, and they were selling them for $4. And the government's like, well, we'll have the taxpayers prop up this business because, you know, we'll make up the loss on volume, as the old joke goes. It's crazy. Hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer guarantee for that company. And they've learned no lessons in this. They think the government is a great venture capital partner in green energy deals. Well, because it's also an enormous apparatus that Democrats have put themselves into all over the place. You have big investors in the green energy sector now, but they need taxpayer cash. They can't allow the market to just do what it does. They can't allow people to make decisions based upon profit. They have to push this based upon fear. So that's why Joe Biden is sitting here telling everybody, oh, we're going to invest in the green energy of the future. Yeah, the government's going to be writing checks from your pocket to put money in the pockets of people that are going to sell, you know, carbon offsets and wind farms and turbines and all this other nonsense, right? It's happening, folks, but it's going to happen over the next 100 years. Biden can stop pretending he's going to make it happen in the next 4 years. And then there's the problem that Pennsylvania had last night in Philadelphia. Let's get into that. Let's recall, what was the biggest news story of the summer in 2020? Was it the recovery from COVID-19 the economy was having? No, that was a story, but it wasn't the thing that dominated the headlines. It wasn't what all of social media was constantly alight with. It wasn't that. No, it was protests against police brutality. That's what it started out as, right? The Black Lives Matter movement. And then it very quickly morphed into corporate America bending the knee and begging forgiveness from the BLM movement for all the historical oppression and inequity in society. And then it turned into toppling statues, including statues of Christian missionaries, you know, Junipero Serra and conquistadors and Christopher Columbus, and I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? It began perhaps with a few Civil War Confederate statues, but they also went after statues of Abraham Lincoln. So there was the statue toppling frenzy, and we were all told that if you opposed that, right, if you thought that it was unnecessary to pull down the statue of Theodore Roosevelt in front of the Museum of Natural History, founded in part by Theodore Roosevelt in New York City, you're a bad person. That's what we were being told. And then there were all these riots, and they kept happening. There was this night of the purge, as I call it, in New York City, where Midtown Manhattan had people just shattering storefronts and looting, and I mean, Macy's, one of the most famous department stores in the world, was looted in Manhattan, in the biggest city in America. Just people running in, stealing stuff, smashing the windows. Hundreds and hundreds of people running around. Very few arrests made. It was madness. Somehow we were to believe that this was about protesting police injustice. And it was all kicked off by the George Floyd incident with police in Minneapolis, where eventually, or soon after that incident happened, a police station was burned down. Remember that? In Minneapolis, they burned down a police station. That all dropped off right around September. All of a sudden, people either didn't care as much about police brutality, with the exception of Portland, which is now just like an anarchist zone. They can do whatever they want there. Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, is a little moron who's Antifa's errand boy and is always defending them and trying to make sure that no one says mean things about them, even while they're spitting and cursing in his face, because that's what lunatic left-wing losers do. But they clearly recognized, the more organized activist protest left realized that they are going to have to stop doing so much of this, because if they show how much defund the police quickly turns into just hating police and demanding a separate set of rules for left-wing activists from the rest of society, namely that you can attack cops and not suffer any consequences. You can destroy property. You can be a federal criminal vandal and should not suffer any consequences. That when people see that, they, over time, recognize that this is wrong, that this should not be allowed, that this should not continue. And we have 1 week before the election night. I'm not sure that it's going to be even determined whether who wins or loses that day. We have 1 week left. And just before people are going to be lining up here, if they haven't already, I know 60 million have voted early, they are reminded of what Biden voters and BLM activists think is appropriate behavior in a major American city. Last night in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, which is a part of the city that I've actually spent time in because it's where the University of Pennsylvania is, you had a man who was a 27-year-old black man was shot by police officers. It is on bystander video, and they have body cams. All right? So here's what ended up happening. You had cops show up to the scene, and there was some disturbance, and Walter Wallace Jr. Said had a knife in his hand. They looted, of course, because what better way to show you're opposed to police violence than to steal sneakers from innocent people who have nothing to do with police violence, right? There's a store owner, there's employees. It's just theft. They're not stealing from cops even. They're just stealing from people. But, they also attacked cops. 30 of them were injured. One female police officer in Philadelphia run over by a guy, it seems intentionally, with a car. Drove a car into a line of cops. That's the kind of stuff that's happening in Philadelphia right now. 30 officers were wounded, including with broken bones, getting hit with rocks and the usual mayhem that we see in the streets. The Democrat Party embraced this. The Democrat Party really is responsible for this mentality that somehow this is acceptable. That when there's an incident that involves police, there are body cameras. We're all going to see exactly what happened. Why the resort to violence, looting, and destruction right away? Yeah, there's camera footage. I've seen it. We could play it for you here on the radio, on the show, but it's disturbing. It is disturbing. I mean, it's somebody you're watching in real time as someone loses his life. But I can tell you, having watched the video, he's moving aggressively. He has a knife in his hand. There's no dispute about the facts. He's going toward the officers. Two of them, they have their guns drawn, and they're saying, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. What do the BLM activists, what do the Democrats who talk about police reform, what do they want these cops to do? Oh, and then you immediately hear afterwards, well, they shot 10 times. Maybe they should have shot him in the leg or something. I'm assuming they probably had 9mm handguns. They're terrified. They could very quickly be killed in this circumstance. And the assumption is that if you're going to try to shoot somebody in the leg, what if then it doesn't actually stop this person from closing that distance and they're able to get one good stab in at your neck or your vitals? Do you want to take that chance? You shoot to stop the threat. That's it. That's the way law enforcement's trained. That's the only way they can be trained. And also, you're trying to shoot somebody in the leg, the chances of you missing are high. Dysfunction or problems in minority communities across the country is predominantly the fault of aggressive policing and law enforcement. That's really the problem. That's the violence that should be of greatest concern. In New York City, we had almost a 300% year-to-year increase for last week in shootings, but it's cop violence that we all need to be worried about. I think everybody saw last night in Philadelphia a reminder of what the Biden voters out there really think should happen. People get upset because they've been taught to think that cops are the bad guys, cops are the problems, and then if they want to act out, if they want to break the law, they should be allowed to do so without consequence. No, not if we're going to keep living in a country called America where rule of law matters. You can't do that. People do need to be punished for this, and the punishment should be severe. Although if you look at the district attorney, Krasner in Philadelphia, I'm sure people will get off for this stuff. Assaulting officers, looting stores, stealing. Democrats are the party of lawlessness. Once again, it's emotion over reason.
Okay, Mr. Biden, if I can.
Sure.
Questions and controversy continues today about Hunter Biden, your son's.
There is no controversy about my son. It's all a lie. It's a flat lie because the president has nothing else to run on. If you notice, while American people are talking about what's happening to their families, he has no plan. In the debate, he has no plan. Everything from the Wall Street Journal over every other major news outlet has said what he's saying is simply not true about my son.
It's not true? Interesting. So I'm of two minds on this whole Hunter Biden situation, as you know. I would say I'm disgusted, but I expected this. Yeah, sure. Hunter Biden is a total screw up, and the guy was making money off of his dad, and everything that was said about that before was true. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. It's gross. It's corrupt. But I am also here to tell you that this is a conservative media and base fixation that I just don't believe is going to make a difference in this election. I felt that way all along. Doesn't mean it's not worth covering and talking about, as we have. It's an interesting story. It shows that the Democrats are putting forward a candidate who is clearly ethically compromised, and they don't care. First, in my mind of all this is that it shows that the mainstream or the mainstream media, but also the major tech platforms out there on social media, Twitter, Facebook, they were willing to suppress this story at the absolute peak of an election. So that's a lesson that I hope we apply to the future and take action on. But if we're thinking that this Hunter Biden thing is, that putting out more emails that show just what a messed up, sad individual of poor judgment this Hunter Biden is, it's not going to do anything. It really isn't. I'm telling you. I know people say, oh, Buck, you don't know that yet. And there's all this frenzy around it. And the conservative media ecosystem is really focused in on this one. I just don't see it. You think that people care about whether they believe Hunter Biden is gross and corrupt, or they care about who they think is going to be better at managing the economy next year? Better at dealing with COVID, right? These are the big questions that move people one way or the other. I just don't think Hunter Biden really matters all that much. It reminds me a lot of Benghazi. Now, that was a very serious incident, and we obviously lost 4 brave Americans. And if it was not for the heroism of some former military contractors overseas, we would have lost a whole lot more people in that incident. And it was gross dereliction by the Obama administration, by Hillary Clinton specifically as Secretary of State. But does anyone really think that that cost Obama any votes? Or Hillary any votes, for that matter? Really? There are a lot of things that cost Hillary votes. I don't think Benghazi was one of them. But we spent a lot of time on that one. You know, Trey Gowdy built a whole career just pounding the table. Well, I'm going to get answers on Benghazi. Yeah, sure you are. You know, so, you know, Lindsey Graham with the Durham probe, a similar idea. You know, oh, we're going to get the answers any moment now. Just watch me tonight on cable news and we'll get the answers for you. I just don't think the Hunter Biden story is going to make a difference. And I'll tell you this, if Joe Biden wins, nothing bad's happening to Hunter Biden or anybody else involved in this or around this. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So you can just forget about that, too. People are like, oh, but there'll be more revelations. You think under a Biden administration, anybody in the Justice Department is going to touch a corruption case involving the president's son? See, what they accuse our side of doing, the kind of despotism and authoritarianism that they say that our side is guilty of, once again, they're actually guilty of it, right? Meaning that the regime protection is going to be a top consideration. And it's funny because Kamala's out there saying the opposite of what will be true, which is that a DOJ under a Biden administration won't be there to protect the Biden administration. Play 10. I'm sorry, play 11.
There is a huge difference between Joe Biden and my perspective on the Department of Justice and Donald Trump. We will not have a Department of Justice that conducts itself as the personal lawyer of the president, such as the way that Donald Trump has done. And whoever leads the Department of Justice, if we win, is someone who will be independent and will make the decisions based on whatever in their discretion with the facts and evidence they have is appropriate without any interference from the White House, period.
Well, we shall see. Well, actually, hopefully we won't see because Biden won't end up winning. But I can tell you this, if you want to worry about reprisals and payback from the Justice Department, just get ready for what Biden's team will do when they come in.